right, we got another panel for you. Amazing topic. This is one that as I've gone to all these events, we really start talking about kind of the same topics, and I really like this CareStack event because the topics have just been very different, right? And so we're going to address kind of outsourcing and what the benefits that can bring for your organization. So we've talked a lot about how to increase revenue. Now we're doing some more expense reduction stuff. So if you want to go ahead, we'll introduce ourselves. Himesh, we'll start with you, kind of who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Himesh Kana. We are a group called Dental Depot. We are a fully doctor-owned DSO. We're an OPCO-PROPCO. We have 40 locations now in 5 states. We own all the real estate and practices. I'm the regional partner or managing partner for Dallas.
So my name is Sasha Tapie. I am the co-owner of TLC Dental. We're down in South Florida. We're a small DSO. We have 6 locations, basically diapers to diapers or cradle to grave, as like we like to say. We cover all the specialties. We're 96 team members strong, and we're seeing about 1,600 patients a week.
My name's Joe Fogg. I'm the CEO and founder of onDiem. We're a staffing platform, but we're also a contingent labor workforce management solution.
Hi, I'm Whitney Weiner. I'm the CEO and founder of Whole Dental Wellness. We're a growing group dental practice in Metro Detroit. Similarly, we own our real estate and excited to be here.
My name is Tim Otto, co-founder of Alcan Dental Cooperative. My wife and I founded that back in 2020. We also have a separate group called Kids Tooth Team Pediatric Dentistry, multi-location specialty practice in Texas and Michigan. And then we also are the founders of Kids Tooth Team Outreach, which is a 501c3 nonprofit mobile dental clinic.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about outsourcing, and I guess to really start, we've had a lot of conversations over the last few weeks about outsourcing, the pros and cons and benefits that we wanted to share with you all today. One of the topics, though, that came up that I want to kind of bring out and clarify before we really get going is you hear the terms offshore, you hear the terms outsourcing, kind of what's the difference between those two, and even amongst our group, it wasn't something that was super clear, so I wanted to start out with that in case we start talking about offshore and we start talking about outsourcing and what the difference is. So outsourcing is a different organization that is doing the work that would normally be done within the organization, right? Offshoring is that it's labor that is no longer close to you locally, right? That is usually overseas and done in another country. So you can outsource and also at the same time being offshored. You can offshore but still have it be in-house where it's someone that's a part of your team. And then you can also offshore, and which we'll get into and talk a little bit later with Joe, but you can outsource and actually still have it local labor too. So there's a lot of unique models there. And so I just want to clarify that before we get going. So to start off, to let the audience know about the experience as we speak about it from what's going on, I want to go just kind of down the line of what are you actively outsourcing? Let the audience know what you're actively outsourcing right now, and what have you tried to outsource in the past that you may not be actively outsourcing anymore. So we'll start down here with you, Tim.
Yeah, so currently, right now, we're outsourcing our RCM function, both on the insurance verification side as well as the claims management and support side. We also outsource our accounting side, especially on the data entry portion of that. And then we have outsourced our call function, or sorry, I should say we actually offshored our call function, brought that back in-house, and now we're currently evaluating outsourcing that again.
Okay.
So currently we are not outsourcing anything. I've failed at it many, many times. We have in the past tried RCM, call center, we tried social media and a virtual assistant, and we have since then brought it all back in-house. So
okay, we'll get into that.
So onDiem as a corporation, we outsource some developers to help build our tech stack, but we help DSOs outsource clinicians.
So we have outsourced RCM in the past. As we grew very rapidly, we made a decision to take it back in-house because of our growth and when we looked at costs and when we looked at time. But we're actually at the point now where we're going to be looking to outsource it again because there's some odd economies of scale as you're going through that growth. Typically, your insurance verification, one of the challenges that we have in South Florida in particular is we attempted outsourcing temps for hygiene, not with onDiem, but with hygiene and sometimes with dental assistants. But what we found in that arena, and some of it's local to the geography, is the challenges of reliability of team members. In other states, we hear great success stories. In Florida, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
So we have outsourced or insourced, if you will, our RCM process, kind of a soup to nuts. We were early adopters of CareStack, and so we strategically built the RCM process with them back 2017 and went through the ups and downs of everything that we've gone through of building an ideal RCM process. Now we're looking to now scale our call center, which we built initially in-house, and looking to now do some outsourcing with some growth around our call center.
All right, so outsourcing is one, there are pros and cons, right? This is not one, like we had the previous panel with software innovation, and software innovation is pretty clear cut, right? Like there are benefits that everyone can reap for it by doing certain things. With outsourcing, it's interesting because you're essentially plugging into a business that you no longer control what is going on in that business. So if they do it better than you, then great, you benefit from it. If they do it worse than you, you also suffer from that too, right? So as you're sitting there, let's talk about kind of ones that have decided outsourcing worked for us, right? So Tim, you said that you're actively doing that. What is the benefit that you are getting from outsourcing?
I mean, it's myriad, right? So it's not only on the financial side of things where you now have somebody else who's supporting your core functions. So for pediatric practices, just for example of scale, each one of our locations is submitting roughly 500 claims a month. It's a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for an admin team to handle when at the same time trying to deliver an excellent patient experience. So I think our patients have benefited more than anybody from patient experience. There's no way that you can walk in to a dental practice and talk to somebody who's just gotten off the phone after yelling with an insurance company about claims and then have them be all bright and cheery and provide an excellent patient experience. So I think for us, first and foremost, the patient experience has benefited, which is everything. And then obviously from a financial standpoint, we've approached it very deliberately and set goals, as far as collection ratios, percentage of write-off, right, insurance verification errors and things like that. So from a financial standpoint, we've also been benefactors from that.
But it isn't all sunshine and rainbows for you because you've attempted to do stuff that you've now had to bring back in-house, right? What happened there?
Yeah, so especially with the call function with offshoring, I think we approached it, and this would be a word of caution to anybody who's even doing outsourcing, you can't just throw it over the fence. It's not something that you can toss over and go, okay, that's done, next problem, right? It's an iterative process. You have to work hand in hand to develop the goals, to develop the metrics and the outcomes that you're looking to get. The company won't do it for you, right? They'll do the heavy lifting for you, but you still have to work hand in hand with them. We didn't do that originally when we did the outsourcing or that offshoring for the call center. We just expected them to naturally fit in with our culture and naturally fit in with our systems and processes without investing the time and the training necessary to get them to be active and productive members of our team. And so that was a mistake.
Okay. And we'll dig a little bit into kind of what we've learned. And Whitney, I'd love to hear your story too. But Dr. Himesh, I know that we've been able to chat a little bit over the last few days. You're a numbers guy, right? You're looking at everything that's going in and out of your organization. You've got it dialed in. And yet you still choose the outsourcing model, right? What are the benefits that you're seeing that keeps you doing that?
Yeah, I think if, there's a lot of groups here, smaller groups, 2 or 3 locations looking to go to 5 locations or 5 locations going to 10 locations, right? You really have to ask yourself, if I'm looking to outsource, what's the purpose of the outsource, right? Is it because you're trying to save dollars? Is it because there's a capital issue? Is it a capital HR issue? You really have to figure out what your reasons behind outsourcing is. I think that's key number one. I think Tim said it the best. If you are going to outsource, you can't just wipe your hands of it and just say outsource and magically the outsource becomes perfect. Even though we have an outsource, in-source resolution with our RCM with CareStack, we actually internally have really understood the processes kind of start to finish on RCM first. Now we can engage with an outsourcing team that our team, we have 2 fundamental people in our organization that manages that outsource team on an RCM that reports back to us. Same thing with phones. If you are going to do it, you need to figure out why the purpose of your reasoning is. If you're trying to scale a DSO and you're thinking you're going to do it entirely by just doing outsourcing, you may be challenged and you may have issues where where we have to bring it back in. And now you want to manage it yourself, and now you've got to revamp that whole logic. So, I think if you understand the why behind it, really build processes around it, and then you can train your team on what that's supposed to look like, your solutions will get better, and you can actually then concentrate on the parts that you want to concentrate on versus spending effortless hours on things that maybe you're not good at.
What was your why? Why do you continue to do it? Why do you enjoy doing it? Dr. Himesh?
Say that again.
What's your why for outsourcing? Why do you outsource?
So for me, there's only so many hours in the day that I can do absolutely everything I want to do. I'm a clinician by nature. I don't practice nearly as much as I used to. I'm more kind of with the doctors hip to hip. But where can you spend your time the best? And so really it was a value of time and then efficiencies. And once I could build those in, ideally, I think somebody was asking me earlier, we collected on our RCM side with our outsourcing almost 100% of our insurance collections last year. Just not very many people that can say that, but I can tell you years ago, that probably wasn't the case. We had to go really strategically look inside, challenge our offshore team and our onshore team to really manage what they want to do. And now those systems are built, and it's just like clockwork. When a claim goes out, we can know the life cycle of that claim all the way through the bank account.
Yep.
Sasha, what are your thoughts on it?
So I want to speak to what we're talking about very specifically, but when you're looking at outsourcing, there's a lot of different reasons that practices will look at it, right? Cost savings, access to possibly human capital, right? Can we scale? But the other thing that I think sometimes people forget to look at is it mission critical, or is it something that if you have bumps in the road, that you can suffer those bumps? For example, if your collections might get delayed a little bit because you're outsourcing RCM, or is it someone answering your phone that if they don't make that great first impression, that patient's going to call up and say, you know what, let me call you back. So those are the things I think that are very important to consider. And like you've said, Himesh, like you said, Tim, it's managing that process in advance. One of the things that I've learned a long time ago when we do this with our organization is whenever we're rolling something out, whether it's technology, whether it's outsourcing, whether it's bringing something back in, we'll take a single practice that is the most problematic and we'll pilot it there. Because I think it was Churchill that said it, the best laid battle plans will always change once you enter the battlefield. So you get a chance to see what the reality of it is when the rubber hits the road, whether you're bringing it back in or whether you're putting it back out. And monitoring it very, very closely because it is not a switch that you just flip.
So let's go down the road now of, we've talked a lot about the benefits of doing it and of doing it successfully, but what is the cost going to be if you do it and it's not successful? All right, so Dr. Whitney, your answer, and it may be something weird that the audience feels, is that you're not actively outsourcing, right? You're still open to the idea and considering it again. Let's go back. I want to kind of dig into the history of outsourcing, right? What did you do that you felt, because one of the things I appreciated when we chatted about it is you were like, it's on us, right? It was not their fault, it was our fault, right? What happened? What was it that you guys are doing that you, looking back, would have done differently if you considered doing it again in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it goes back to the why. Like Himesh was saying, so for us, we had a problem and we were trying to fill a hole, and I think there's been so many themes that have been interwoven through this conference, right? Build the bench, evergreen mentality, all of those things. And given, the last speakers were talking about COVID whiplash coupled with inflation and where are we at and how are we keeping our teams healthy? And for us, culture is everything. So I fully would say we failed those systems. We failed those companies because we had a shortness within our own organization and we threw it over the fence and said, okay, partner, help us fix this. But who is managing them? And as far as insourcing, when we've tried that, who's the direct contact at our company that makes them feel like a part of the team? Are they in the huddles? Are we having that cultural connection that is so important to who we are? So are those extended teams really a reflection of us, or are we seeing that as a way to drive down our percentages? And so with that, I'm eager to try again, learning from that. And with the bench built, with the key implementers, with the operations team backing it, not just something exciting that I learned from a conference and I'm a quick start and here we go.
Okay. So I like the idea, one of my go-to euphemisms, I guess, is that technology is a tool, right? It's the same thing with outsourcing, right? These partners are not a end-all be-all solution, right? We've reiterated that multiple times. They are a tool to be able to accomplish an outcome, but that doesn't mean that they don't come without being able to follow up with them and kind of work with them, right? So as we think about going in and kind of scaling the organization with these partners at hand, why would we want to do that? What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, from a scalability standpoint, that was one of the main strategic reasons why we chose to outsource some of these functions, because in the decision, and Himesh can talk to this a little bit more, but to in-house a call center, in-house a revenue cycle management function for something what we're planning on doing, which is growing to 80 to 100 locations in a very short period of time, that takes a tremendous amount, not only of resources, of human capital, but also of your own time. And so we've all talked about this. There's only so much time in the day that we have as owners, as co-founders, as operators to really focus on the few problems that we can actually put our brain power into and fix on a daily basis. And so being able to address one of these things and have somebody else being held accountable for that so that we can then go focus our resources and our time and efforts and energy on the problems that we're better adapted to handling is a large portion on the strategic side of why we've decided to outsource.
If we can't throw it over the fence and expect them to do it perfectly, how detailed do we need to get in what we're doing, right? I know, Himesh, you got very detailed. You were also kind of helping them structure it, but that's not everybody's style of outsourcing, right? It's almost, I mean, I'm of the opinion, like, I'm gonna go build this from the ground up for you. Why not I just build it for me, right? Instead of doing that. Right, so what does it take to become successful at outsourcing if we have to still be involved to some degree? How deep do we need to be involved?
So, and I'm gonna share some numbers. I think Tanner said it. I'm kind of a numbers guy. I'm a numbers nerd. And so here's kind of what we looked at. If you kind of look at my P&L, I've got a line item of what my RCM process is costing me on an offshore. And we looked at it very deeply last year and said, hey, I think I could have a savings to bring this back in-house. And that savings, so you guys know, is about $100,000. And $100,000 on my EBITDA is a pretty sizable number, right? All right, so I had to now take a deeper decision. If I decide to bring RCM back in-house and save the $100,000 in my cost, which will come to EBITDA, is it worth my value and time? Meaning, if I had to manage those 12, 14 people, hire them, train them, 401k them, benefit them, do all the above that it goes into my payroll cost, would it have taken away from my resources to be able to go do something which is like grow top-line revenue, right? And ultimately, the decision we made is our focus still needs to be consistent top-line revenue. It's not a broken process. I was just looking at my P&Ls in this massive inflammatory market. Inflation's hitting all of us. Where could I possibly save money? And so for us, it's just the value constant of time. And so it wasn't a broken process. It works very well. If I brought it back in, is there a risk that I wouldn't collect almost 100% of my collections? And the delta of my loss in collections would have been different from my delta in paying an extra $100,000 and not having to really manage it other than what we're doing in-house. And ultimately, the numbers just made sense. Concentrate on top life. Melinda and I made the decision, top line. Melinda and I made the decision that we're going to focus back on same-store growth, which is the mantra, I think, in this market that we're in. And ultimately, we're going to keep going in the direction we're doing it.
I would add on to that, if you don't mind, but just Whitney and I were talking backstage and just like the actual physical space, right? So right now, she has the room where she was telling me where she's got room to house a couple of the RCM employees, right? But you're building ortho, right?
Correct.
And so talk a little bit about that and what you're going to do when the ortho is taking up that space and you're producing clinically and not having any room for your RCM employees.
Yeah, great question, Tim. So we launched ortho yesterday. Woohoo! Very excited about that. And oh, thanks, God. Woo! Thank you. It's like the dance team is up here with us. It's downstairs. But with that, yes, we have a vacant space that our RCM department, which is 2 people right now, is sitting in. Well, what does that cost? Are we sophisticated enough to actually do the square footage and run that through the resource center to get an accurate EBITDA? No. That's not the level of granularity that we have in our organization. However, to the point, it's like, what is the savings? Like Himesh is saying, are we looking for financial savings? Yes, it's great to be profitable and boost those numbers. Time, I think, is the ultimate currency. And for us too, it's okay, what about the mental health and wellness of our team? Because that is so much of everything. And we've talked a lot at this conference about culture of change, right? How do we take chaos and how do we make it into momentum? And how do we tie that together? And again, in transparency, before we had a hole that we tried to fill with outsourcing and insourcing, basically offshoring. instead of a proactive mentality of how to build the team to successfully train and execute on those systems. So with that being said, yes, I fully think that when we gut that space, hopefully next year, and make it this beautiful ortho building, I anticipate us having one key member of RCM who's leading and running our systems, and we will offshore that team. So again, I think that hindsight 2020 and future looking, it's more of, okay, let's build the foundation instead of jump off the cliff and look for the parachute. Thanks, Tim.
So, go ahead, Joe.
Take a little different spin on it. When you look at your P&L, 50% of your P&L is staff and labor. When you look at the current labor shortages that we're already facing right now, I have some bad news and some good news. It's expected to get worse over the next 5 years. 14,000 hygienists retire every year. Schools only graduate 7,000. You have a 2% growth rate of new practices that it's going to stress the system. You talk about same-store growth. Well, your teams are already maxed out. What we have in this country is we have a part-time workforce issue. 80% of hygienists are part-time. So when I hear this attention, everybody's focused on RCM, a bump in here and a bump in here. Well, what you should also be looking at, you said it's $100,000 probably on your EBITDA. Well, that's roughly 20 days in production of a $1,500 hygiene production day with $3,500 in scheduled treatment that comes out of that. So if you're looking to grow same-store growth, you have a system that is an inherent workforce of part-time clinicians that are working in the 180,000 private practices that are surrounding your DSO practices. So what happens then is if you want to have sanity within your teams who are already stretched, do you have open days and open chairs? You know, you mentioned that you might not have had success with the temp staffing agency, which I could see that if you have a merry-go-round of a revolving door of different clinicians, you can't build continuity. So we're helping DSOs thrive by building additional teams by outsourcing hygienists that if they're Gen Zs, I don't know what's the next generation after, below Gen Zs?
And Alpha.
We're too old.
Alpha, I'm too old. So they're alphas. And so what happens is they have this fear of committing to a full-time job. So the average FTE position to fill a hygienist right now for the national DSOs is 38 days. That's 38 days of lost production or bringing in somebody to build continuity of care with the same clinicians. So everybody talks about how dentistry lags healthcare in hospitals and in assisted living facilities, 30% of that staff is contingent labor. So all this time and energy, I heard Brian talk about same-store growth. I heard Heidi talk about morale in the teams. There's a lot of energy focused on these other ways, but essentially what happens is most DSOs that we work with consistently, they're focused on the recruiting efforts and talent acquisition for posting permanent jobs and trying to do that versus focusing time and energy to implement a contingent labor strategy to aggregate the part-time workers to bring them in to help be part of their team. So I think if I had my own DSO right now, what I would focus on is how can I maximize my operatory yields with consistent clinicians, knowing the fact that the labor market's going to get worse over the next so many years. So then that way you could focus on, okay, how do I assimilate them to be part of the team? Because they want to work in the same office over and over and over. They just may have a fear of committing to a full-time job, but they want to be part. So it's about bringing them in. It's a hybrid of outsourcing and insourcing because you're bringing them in to be part of the team.
Yeah. And I think that the interesting thing about the model that you bring up, Joe, is, I mean, yes, there is the clinical shortage, and most people think of like outsourcing as like we're going to solve back office functions, right? Like my natural gut reaction when you initially brought it up on our phone call was like, oh, you can't outsource like hygiene work. But the reality is like that's essentially what is happening, right? Whenever it's labor that you're bringing in to be a part of your organization, but you're not directly contracted with them, right? You are outsourcing them inside of your own office. We're going to add, Sasha.
So to kind of speak to that, and this covers the human capital because there is a human capital shortage out there, but when you're outsourcing, I said before, is it something that's mission critical or is it something that's back office that you could suffer time a little bit that doesn't impact your business? And one of the other things to consider is when I look at Joe's team, they're trained, they're vetted. It's not just a body that they're throwing in there, but what's the impact to the patient? Because when you look at our medical industry as a whole, right, we're one of the verticals in dental, right? And every practice owner is always concerned because the most intimate vertical is the OBGYN gynecology vertical. The second most intimate vertical is dental. That's us. You have a patient laying back in the chair prone that doesn't know what's going on, so it's trust. And we as business owners, when you're hip to hip with your doctors and when I'm interacting with the patients at the front, what is that experience going to be like? Because that person is representing my brand, my name, and my TLC family. So is it going to be a temp that comes in that I'm proud to show? Or is it going to be someone who shows up a half hour late and doesn't have a clue as to what's going on? So those are the mission critical ones that you can't afford to suffer, because one day of bad patient experiences with one hygienist is literally 80 patients that will hear about it. But conversely, when you get someone that's already prepped, when it's done properly, because your outsourced vendors, whether it's front-facing or in the back, are also your strategic partners. They're the people that you might be doing it in 5 offices or 40, but they may be covering hundreds. And one of the things that I've learned a long time ago is the vendors that have that broad swath of experience, let me learn from you. Tell me what's not working at another practice. Tell me what's succeeding wildly, and also tell me what's relevant geographically too. Because when you go to look at Florida, Miami, Broward, and West Palm, they're all interconnected. It's one big urban sprawl. But the culture, the community, and I'm not talking about the demographics, but just the patient or customer behavior varies wildly.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, right? So I think I'm 51, so I think I'm Gen X, between a boomer. I'm in that weird space, right? But if you're under the age of 30 right now, you do not have that intimate relationship with your hygienist or your dentist. They simply want to be seen when they want to be seen.
Commoditized, yeah.
It's commoditized. So then the contingent labor of a clinician coming to your office typically is only as good as the way the office is treating them and welcoming them and bringing them in to be part of the fold. We get it all the time where there is no strategy from the top down to the different location levels on how are they going to receive and bring in embed this new clinician to make them feel part of the team and kind of set those expectations. Is there a 30-minute or a 15-minute welcoming and showing where the sterilization is, where the break room is, here's how we do things, here's how we do note-taking. So when you do that, the probability of that person going to want to come back over and over, we'll have people that will work 180 days in the same practice. So it is about focusing on the gentleman earlier that talked about the associates and retention. You know, he really spoke about he referred to it as offense or defense, like reactive or proactive. Are you working on establishing a strategy? Because you have to, especially if it's going to get worse over the next 5 years and you want to go same store growth, you don't have enough clinicians to do same store growth. So it's a matter of what is your strategy to manage that?
And Joe, to speak to what you're speaking, it's imperative that whichever vendor you have, that you're working as a partnership. It's not something you toss out and flip a switch. And I also go back to when you look at the younger generation, in our industry, we spend a fortune acquiring new patients, but the most valuable ones are the ones that we have already, right? Number one. Number two, statistics tell us the following, and this is why it's so important to consider. I look at 2 channels that come in of patients. The one channel is patients that have personal referrals, right? The data tells us that those patients, 78% of them will accept treatment on the first visit. Then the other channel is everything else. And when you have those people that commoditize us, if you give an experience that they've never had before, that all of a sudden changes into that intimate trust relationship. And patient retention, to me, we don't focus enough on it, but if we do, that patient retention is what gets us our referrals, and that's what allows us to grow geometrically without spending those dollars. And that's where the proper partner holding us accountable. And the most successful relationships I've had with vendors are the vendors that would call me up like, hey, Sash, what the F are you doing? Or what is your team doing? And I love that. A lot of vendors are afraid to do that, but it's our success mutually.
Well, and Sasha, just to jump in there too, I think a big part of it, well, Joe, what you're doing, I think is brilliant, like brilliant. I would say disruptive. And with that, it's like who is the patient, right? Because everything's about customer experience. Who is our customer? To me, my customer is our team. And so for me, if I serve my customer as the team member, then they are going to serve the patient. And so that is the mentality that we are built on. And with that, we get back, I mean, mental health is a huge thing now. It always has been now. That Band-Aid's been ripped off. And we have these team members that they don't want to work, to Joe's point, 40 hours. They're moms. They are connected, proud mom, but with that said, it's like, what is balance and what is harmony and how do we find that? Our goal is not to be this DSO enterprise that squeezes the juice until everything becomes a raisin. It's how do we cultivate and plant the trees is how I look at it. So with what Joe's doing, we had a little sidebar too, and I'm like, this is so smart. So if we already have a full-time team, we're open 4 days a week for balance and harmony, why not have a partner with repeating people that you plug in on that extra day that allows for the Gen X's, whoever it is, to book online, have that amazing service, and they love it. So I just think there's so much brilliance and integration of systems and in being able to utilize that in a way that is true to your culture and your company and has your team at heart. Because all these things that we're listening to are so brilliant when we're talking about, okay, P&L, let's pack it, let's increase EBITDA, at what cost? So everything has a cost, and it shouldn't be working 50 hours and turnover and all of that. How can we leverage these different companies like you're doing to grow in happiness and in margin?
I love that you said that, just to add that. So here's one thing that just, it fascinates me, and also I have empathy for this labor force. So what DSOs do great is they offer benefits that they traditionally don't get in the private practice setting. So the Health Policy Institute, the ADA, and the ADHA did a study last year, and out of the 180,000 private practices, only 20% of them offered health insurance to their employee base. You have to have over 50 employees to offer health care to your part-time employees, or they have to achieve 30 hours over a 5-week period. 2 days is 16 hours, 3 days is 24 hours. Most clinicians don't get it. It's the largest workforce of healthcare workers that are not offered healthcare insurance. The average age of women getting married right now is 31 in the country, which 8 years ago it was 25. The divorce rate went from 48% to 54%. So there's an abundance of clinicians working in part-time practices surrounding your practices that do not get access to benefits. And so there's an opportunity for you there. If you look at, can you put a benefits package together that could allow them, for your part-time workers, because that's the biggest, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just the safety and comfort and security. We've figured out a way to where we can offer these part-time clinicians and run them through DSOs to handle those labor law burdens for you guys. There's all these new opportunities that are going to evolve that you just need to explore.
You gonna add something, Himesh?
As we look at the groups here, I mean, whether you're 1 practice, 2 practice, 5, to go into 10 or 15 another, right? We all go into our practice. Raise your hand if your team say that their hair's on fire. Right? Like.
Put both hands up.
Yeah, right? So we get it all the time. We're going, our hair's on fire. And what we have to do there, and when we get into outsourcing and leveraging technology, there's a fine line for all of it. There's a culture tip, there's a human capital cost, there is, am I going to lose my job, part of it, right? And ultimately, 4 years ago, right, the world changed, right? COVID hit this world, and we had no idea coming out of it what it was going to look like. We thought we're going to lose our practices, we're going to lose our, no one's going to come to the dentist. I mean, we were hearing data and things all over the place. And so here we are now 4 years post, COVID, and what we've recognized is that we've got a massive human capital issue. And if we look at it, we're just stealing from each other. You need a dental assistant, go steal somebody. You need a hygienist, you go, we just can't do it. You need a business office team member, you need a better treatment coordinator, you can't do it. So ultimately what you have to look at is what's causing your teams to have their hair on fire. And can we support them internally in our DSO or internally DSO with an outsourcing model in which we can manage that can do it? Well, one of the things that we looked at this year, which is a hot topic for us, is phone calls. Like, measure your data. We can talk about saving money and outsourcing and saving $100,000 if I brought, RCM in. But then over here, we could be losing 13% of our phone calls, right? Which will manage top line. And so, but why were we losing so many phone calls, or 10, 12, I heard the industry standards like a drop call like 35% or something, and I think we're missing 12% of our calls. And I said, well, that's terrible. We're missing 12% of our calls. I go, at the average per visit, per cost of what an appointment is, and we added this up, I go, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost potentially on just the fact we didn't probably ideally answer a phone call. But what's happening? At the sites, you've got everyone trying to answer a phone call, they're checking in a patient, they're trying to exude a culture at a level that we want to have this 5-star service, and we at the top say we've got everything figured out at a 5-star service, and then they're having to live our model. And they get challenged with this because they're doing everything that we ask them to do, and there's just not enough time to do everything. And so we had to take a really careful look at our teams, their lives, what they go through on an 8-hour day, and could we pull things out that would make their lives easier, that they could provide, to Whitney's point, a 5-star experience to our patients. And I asked the team, hey, would you deliver a better experience if you never had to answer a phone? How many of your teams would say yes? Every one of them. All of them, right? Well, phones tend to be a nuisance to our teams. That's what we realized. We realized when the phone rang, it was one of those nodding of the heads, who's going to answer, and we were losing our minds because that's new business to us. So we're taking a really careful dive this year into the way our phones are managed, but we're using technology and we're using leverage data on what we think an outcome will be, and that will then really lead us to a phone situation that whether we build it internally and outsource that team. So we're looking to build that internally, and instead of having 10 phone operators internally, my team, my 1 or 2 people may be able to, I can outsource that team and they manage that entire team from at home, right? And so now instead of having a staffing labor shortage here, I've got an abundance of staff, and as soon as I needed 1 additional staff member to answer more phone volume, because we're looking at the data, we just check the box and we hire another offshore person team. And I'm saying this because this is kind of the direction we're going to, so that you guys are growing. Ultimately, look at what's causing your team stress and try to alleviate that, and your culture just gets better. And so that's kind of where we're looking at it.
So I want to dig down to that a little bit, Himesh, because what you're really starting to touch that I want to really kind of flesh out for our audience is like, what are the criteria that we consider as we consider outsourcing or building in-house, right? So if you think about building it in-house and not outsourcing, a lot of the times we think naturally it's easier, but it's a very different skill set to go on and build something out from the ground up, right? So if you say going in and doing the work is a certain skill set, going in and building out a team to do the work, that's a very different skill set. And it's not something that is natural in a dental office, right? We have a bunch of people that are really good at doing the work, that they have the experience, et cetera. But then to be able to say, hey, now we know, okay, if we need to add on another office, how are we gonna scale out the training, right? How are we gonna scale out to make sure that the processes are done right, et cetera? And so it's not as easy as just, oh, well, if you can't outsource it because you can't find the right partner, then just insource it, because insourcing comes with its own difficulties and struggles that people don't recognize all the time, right? So the thing that I always say is there's 3 personality types within an office. There's those that make it up, those that make it happen, those that make it real. The ones that make it real are the ones that are out there doing it. The ones that make it up, that's us. Those are the ones here that are learning about where we need to go. But the disconnect that happens is who are the ones that are making it happen? Who are the ones out there actually building it? And those are a lot of the ones that we miss in dental. Right? In other industries, those are the project managers, those are the ones that kind of sit down and actually like go in and do the analysis, et cetera. But for dental, we're just not built to be able to take that. So understanding that like, hey, just because the alternative, you're not comfortable with the outsourcing doesn't mean that it's all sunshine and rainbows on the insourcing though either. So I'm curious about that with you, Whitney. Like as you've brought that back in-house, I mean, sure, you might have struggled and had a fire when you outsourced it, but was everything sunshine and rainbows when you brought it in, or what was that? How did that feel like for you guys going in and bringing that back in-house?
Definitely not sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows, Tanner. It's interesting, Himesh, when you talk about the phone. Like when we took away phone calls, we had people on our team that missed answering the phone. And like one of our team members, I love Shirley, the fastest around the West, we call her, she would like twitch, getting ready to answer the phone because she missed the phone call. And so I found it fascinating. And so we did an exercise where we ran our whole team through a fit filter and we're like, okay, do we have the head, the heart, and the hands to do this? And are we in the right seat on the bus? And that was illuminating. So I think bringing it back in and seeing what was missed, and then also the turbulence that came with it, to your point, because uncoupling a system, at least for us, was a nightmare. Uncoupling, you give everything to another company, in-source, offshore, whatever it is, and then trying to bring it back. There's those team members that, somewhat rightfully so, are saying, you know what, I knew this was gonna be a failure. Look at me now, I have to fix this. Look at all this stuff I'm doing. And I remember these emails or even sometimes a video message, it's like, look at this, I got this check 2 years later, and it's this badge of honor and pride. And, I think that it's hard. Let me put it that way. Some tornado days, some sunshine days. And for me, I'm learning to listen to the team. And so instead of saying RCM, for example, I really do think we need to offshore it next year when ortho has that beautiful new space. But with that said, our team lead, how would you like to roll into this space? Which vendors do you want to look at? Do you want to insource or offshore? What does that look like to you? Let's map it, 10,000 feet, 90 days, run it backwards, and let's see. And so again, lots of turbulence, social media. We tried to have social media done in Zimbabwe. And for us, it was just too hard to connect with the heart of our culture and company, and that's so important to who we are. And so bringing that in, we ended up, personal journey, but a team member who I love, actually was an assistant of mine, then worked front office, said, I want to be at home. And I said, I love you, Jess, cool, do you want to run our social media? Now she loves her role. She's like a cultural ambassador, and how cool that we were able to afford her that opportunity. So I think having that openness within our organization of where are we now? Do we want to grow inward, upward, or outward? And what does that look like? We need rock stars and shooting stars. Not everyone needs to be a shooting star. And how can we help develop our systems with our team driving instead of me pulling?
What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and I think having the team almost happy or wanting that change that you present to them is so important. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of technological enhancement to your office. Technological enhancement, you're going in and you're driving change from the top down, and you're saying you're going to use this system, essentially. You don't say that in real life, but in so many words, we're going to do this as a company. And really, outsourcing should be viewed as a relief to the team. They should be wanting that change. You're relieving the pressure, you're relieving the pain point that they've been experiencing for the past 6 months, past year, or something like that. And even to Joe's point, hey, we need an additional hygienist. Well, we can't afford an additional hygienist. Well, we've got a solution for you. Amen, thank God. The team's gonna be rah-rah, so happy when they come in, right? So I think that is a huge component of it that can actually be beneficial to your outsourcing strategy, is the fact that you're listening to your team and they're expecting it, they're craving that change. It's an improvement and an enhancement to their lives in particular. So that's my thoughts on it.
And how do they win, right, Tim? Like, not to jump in there,
Absolutely.
but how can they win too? And I love one of the speakers yesterday when they were talking about like 5x revenue and then 20% wages. How can you say, all right, guys, we're going to commit to you, make up the number, that you are going to see growth in your, I love compensation committee too, we need one of those instead of yes, no problem, here's your raise, but which is me to a fault. With that said, how do we leverage that so they want the offshoring, they want to drive that margin down within their department and help reap the reward? Because I think it's laughable to think, for at least me, that I'm building this company, it's our entire team. So how can we all win together? Everyone likes a carrot, and how do we make it creative and innovative with like a culture of curiosity?
Yep. And as a side note, making sure that they understand that there are people on the other side of this platform and this organization. Because like at first you saw some of the emails going back and forth and you're like, wow, would you talk to any of your internal team like that? I don't think so. So these people are aligned with our vision, they're aligned with our goals, and they are helping us out. They're in our practice, they're in our vision, they're suiting our mission and our vision. So treat them as such, treat them as your partner, treat them as your teammate. And I think that's a huge point of implementation that any office who goes through the outsourcing is have like a cultural intervention with your team and make them understand there's people on the other side of it. This is not a robot you're talking to. It's a human being just like you.
And I mean, a lot of that too, it goes into like what components, just because no longer are they doing it, it doesn't mean that they're completely washing their hands of it, right?
Absolutely.
What is done before still impacts the other stuff they have to do. If I have to collect this over the counter, I need to know like, what is this balance? I need to know what happened in the RCM journey. And so I think that you really can't just say, hey, okay, no longer are you doing this. It's also like, okay, but what happens if this happens, right? Where are these processes going? How do I communicate with this team, right? How do I get the clarification if I need it, et cetera? And so really it's not, you're trading one problem for a different one. It means, yes, they're kind of specializing their skill sets down to a certain thing, but it doesn't mean that they're completely eliminating it, right? There's nothing worse than trying to put a treatment coordinator together that has no idea where this insurance estimate came from, right? Like, those questions start flying, and it's completely a waste of time for the patient and for the treatment coordinator. So, but yeah, so you really got to kind of say, okay, well, now what education do you need if you're not going to be hand-holding throughout the whole journey at the same time? And I love, Whitney, kind of what you said, where you said there were personality types that missed it, right? And that's the reality is like if you take the front office admin work, there's a multitude of personality types in there, right? The person that likes to present treatment is very different than the person that likes to answer the phone, which is very different than the person that likes to deal with the insurances, right? So if you take one of those out of the component, you may be taking a part of the job that they really enjoyed with them. I mean, for us, one of the things that we did, which I felt was very successful, is that when we created a central RCM team, we took those individuals that were really passionate about it at the offices, we made them a part of the central team. And so now all of a sudden, instead of saying we're going to offshore all of these components, we said, okay, you own payment posting, you're going to stay kind of at your current salary, et cetera. We didn't fire anybody that wanted to be a part of that. We just augmented the stuff that nobody else wanted to do and added onto that team. And then that's the same thing that's possible with with outsourcing as well, is that if you have somebody that's passionate about getting those claims and following up with them and doing those, then great, leave that with the individual that's a part of your team and offshore the rest or outsource the rest, right? You don't have to have one way or another. Sasha, were you going to add something?
There's something that I'm kind of chomping at the bit right now, but I think it's imperative that all of us remember here. We might be the visionaries, we might be the dream weavers, but I want to take us back to basics. None of us would be where we are without our team, right? And when I joined our organization, TLC, 8 years ago, one of the first things I told every single person in the room, there was about 60 of us, we were a little smaller then, is that, hey, patients aren't coming first anymore. You are. And they all thought I was full of it until they started seeing year after year after year that they actually did come first. But they're our team. They're the ones that build us up. We're here to serve them in a selfish way because the better we make them, the better we do. And it's imperative on any change management that you do in your organization, whether it's software, whether it's outsourcing, right? No matter what it is, that you have your team's buy-in. Because when you have their buy-in, they become the champions for you, right? When you don't, like you said, the moment something goes wrong, I told you not to do this, right?
Never happens.
But here's where a lot of us fail. We fail when we get our vendors, when we get our partners, when we get our outsourcing, and we treat them like a commodity, like when a temp comes in, oh, here, go here. What do you mean you don't know the software, right? But where we fail so often is we're forgetting that our vendors are our partners. And very often, because they're focused in such a specific subset, they have so much more expertise than we are. And if we treat them like a commodity, they'll just check the box. If we treat them like a partner, because there's a person on the other side of all of this, right? It's amazing what they do for you.
I love that. Just to add to that, there's a couple of DSOs that we were working with that didn't hit their Q4 revenue numbers because they didn't, in the scheduling of their locations, no one thought to look at from the operations side. So is staffing, does it fall under talent acquisition or does it fall under operations? They didn't have it defined on either one of those roles. Holidays came up, clinical staff took vacations, they didn't backfill, they didn't plan ahead to have any clinicians ready to go to backfill those. So they had a significant drop in their Q4 earnings because of that. And so part of that is now we're working with them to say, what is they're already talking about what is their summer vacations? Because typically right now, depending on how your practice is laid out, hygienists typically can't take a day off next week or the following week unless they can find a replacement. Well, that's not gonna happen. The second thing is they can't take a vacation on their own except when the doctor takes a vacation. So now that because they want the culture, they wanna mitigate burnout, they're working with us to go far enough ahead to say, here's our vacation schedules. Can you please help us find coverage for these individuals as they're building their onDiem virtual bench, but simultaneously they're out in front of it because it does help with teams, sanity, while at the same time it doesn't impact your revenue objection goals that you want to do for year-over-year or month-over-month growth.
I think it's valuable being able to offer your team members that because if you fight for your team will fight for you. If you don't, they'll fight with you.
So true.
It's the truth.
That's very well said.
Can I steal your job for 2 seconds? Because I wanted to talk about the type of employee, and question for you specifically, Himesh, because you've been doing the RCM longer than we have. But typically, you're hiring for an insurance coordinator role, right? And you're asking them to be a treatment coordinator as well, in treatment presentation. So you're asking a certain type of personality to do something that is the antithesis of their personality, or vice versa. You're asking a bubbly treatment coordinator to submit insurance claims and be an administrative jockey, right? Has utilizing Care Revenue enabled you to hire a different personality and a different type of team member than you would have previously?
Yeah, we actually, Melinda and I actually talk about this. We got in the business to provide care for people. That's what we did. Then we went out and hired a bunch of people that says, we want you to join us because we care for people. Well, your dental assistants get to do direct care to people. Your hygienists get to direct care to people, and the dentists get to do direct care to our patients. But our business team members, there's no business school out there.
We're an apprenticeship.
For business, for dental office, front office team members. There's not a great program. I mean, you can take it to DA school, we can go to dental school. And what we realized over the years was they got into the business in the front office business to help people. But what we did is we said, we need to go into a corner and verify all the insurance. And you need to go into a corner and post all the claims. And you need to fight insurances. Well, who the heck wants to get up and do that job? That's a miserable job. I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, raise your hand if you're in a room if you want to be in that box. And there's a few people, I have a few people that want to be in a closet, and that's exactly what they want to do. To Tim's point, there's a personality style. And ultimately what that allowed us to do is now go find people that really wanted to go spend time with patients, to go get treatment acceptance and pay them better to create better treatment outcomes for patients and not have them worried about this. And we've challenged this all the time. We have an office that has just done record numbers. Linda puts a new office manager in there, and she's just losing her mind because the numbers are too good. But the manager doesn't want to answer phones. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the phones, right? But God, they're closing treatment left, right, and center. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe we don't need him answering phones. Maybe we don't. Not everyone needs to answer phones, right? It's starting to make us relook at the level of our quality of service if we took phones out. Look, if I could solve his problems by managing 75% of the phones, he's a happy guy because he didn't want to answer phones. Well, real simple solution here. Let's figure out the phone problem, right? And to your point, Tim, there's a personality type for everything. We sometimes put a square peg in a round hole and ask them to do things that they don't want to do, and they burn out. They get tired of it, they move on, and they look for something else.
But there's another side to it too, though, and I'll make it so simple. When you talk to your staff, when you talk to your team members, if you find out exactly what they want and what they don't want, if I give you everything you want, you have too much to lose to mess it up.
Right.
And that will create the loyalty, that'll create the happiness, and that'll create them to drive even more, because if you don't do this, you're gonna have to answer phones again.
Yeah.
But if you give people what they want, there's too much for them to lose to mess it up.
And I think it's important to understand that people change, right?
Yes,
and
they
there has to
grow.
be an ability to pivot within your organization, or they're going to pivot right out. And especially post-COVID, people are mean. Like, I feel bad for our front office most days. They take arrows all day. And I just tell them, you know what? This is not your job, and you're not paid well enough to be shot down like that. Put the arrow down, and we will handle it. So I think that we've seen at least a big change in people who want to go into RCM, who maybe want to go in that closet or that dark corner because they're like, you know what, enough. And so to have those quarterly conversations and say, hey, where are you at? Where are you winning? Where can I help you thrive? And how can we reposition you is really important.
Right. And even with our outsourcing, right, or insourcing with CareStack, our teams get upset sometimes that, hey, the RCM team didn't do X, Y, or Z. And so last year we kind of went in and we asked the team, hey, you know what? You guys are a little unhappy with some of the things that happened, and it was minute. When I mean like less than 1% error problem rate on our RCM problems, that's what their hair was on fire about. So it's really, really simple. We're just going to let them go, and we're bringing all claims and outbound right back into the office. You guys are going to verify all the insurances in the next month. And that put an end to that real fast.
Yep.
I love this. I think this is one of those conversations that I can tell the passion is starting to really kind of come out, and I wish we could be on here for another 4 hours to talk about it, but unfortunately we're going to wrap up. So with this, I want to go down the line and kind of say, okay, what is the final piece of advice you give to somebody that was considering either offshoring, outsourcing, or kind of just saying, let's keep this all in-house? Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I heard the word strategy tossed around a lot up here, and I think really final piece of advice would be to zoom out to 60,000 feet and really take a look at your overall strategy. What's your mission? What's your vision? What's your core values? And then can you find, does outsourcing fit within those? So for example, I'm an Aspen Dental, I'm a Smile Brands Dental, right? My values are production, patient care, production, 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 production. Outsourcing the hygiene function, outsourcing for dental assistants, that's like priority number one for me, right? Is that top line growth is maximizing, revenue per chair hour. But in a practice like ours that my wife and I have created, where it's ultra high service, ultra high quality, community engagement, it takes a village type practices, we're not going to outsource that function that would not align with our mission and our vision, right? Creating great patient care in the form of reducing friction and reducing pain points for the patient in the insurance verification phase, in the patient experience, overall feel of the practice. That's why we outsourced RCM. It wasn't even necessarily a financial decision for us. It was a strategic decision from the top level. So that's the parting thought that I would have.
Whitney?
Yeah, for me, it would be drilling down into the why. Why are we doing it? Are we trying to solve a problem, or are we architecting for future growth? And then who's holding that new system or that person accountable, right? Do we have the systems in place, and are we ready to take that on? And Tanner, I think you said yesterday that it takes 12 to 18 months to fully outsource someone. Every system of ours that has failed, we cut in less than a year. So who failed who? I keep going back to that. And so it needs to be the understanding of, okay, we're gonna stick with this. We know there's gonna be hiccups, and we are also gonna hold ourselves accountable during that process. So it would be really drilling down into the why, and then accountability with a clear org chart on how that's gonna fall.
I feel like you knew I was going to say the word strategy, because I think and I'll say it again, on average, 15,000 hygienists are going to retire. The senior hygienists are retiring at a rate over the next 5 years at 15,000. It means the 7,000 that are graduating just happen to be of the age of the workers that don't want to commit to always to a full-time job. So within that, you need to start thinking of a 1-year, 3-year plan of a contingent strategy with this new, younger workforce coming in, and what's appealing to them. Because what's appealing to them is different than my generation. I wanted to save for a house and everything else. They want workforce life balance. And so having a strategy to be able to take care of your team, to support their team, to not burn them out, and I think it's critical as you're thinking of your 1-year, 3-year strategy.
Sasha?
So I believe in the KISS theory, which is keep it simple, Sasha. The most important part about outsourcing, insourcing, about the success of our business is getting your team engaged and making them part of the solution. Because here's one way I'll guarantee you failure. You don't get anybody involved, you don't get anybody's feedback, and you show up one day, hey team, we're gonna be changing to this. Whether it's a platform, whether it's outsourcing, whether it's insourcing. And I promise you, you'll have about 20 fingers pointing at you within a month. You get them engaged. Like I said, it's the KISS theory, keep it simple, Sasha, not the other one. Get your team involved, and they will do all the heavy lifting for you.
When it comes to outsourcing, dentistry as a profession is kind of late to the game, right? You look at other industries, they've been doing this now for decades.
Yeah.
And so we're just now entering this world of outsourcing. And in 5 years, we won't be talking about outsourcing because it'll be the common play of what we do. And you kind of look at other industries and what they're doing and how they're leading it. And that's kind of what we look at. We look at what are other people doing outside of our industry, because sometimes our industry inside doesn't have all the answers, right? And so I'm going to go back to what I initially started with, is if you're looking to insource, outsource, however your concept needs to be, really look at what your real resolutions or solutions you're looking for and map it out. Really think this through. Put a team together to think it through. I mean, we have a laughing joke in our company that Himesh would put a whiteboard everywhere, and my wife will tell you that I'd put one in the bathroom if I could. And so it's just because we're...
Took it down.
Yeah, that's why we take it down. And happy birthday. It's my wife's birthday today, so happy birthday, hon. And so, I think if you kind of look at it with the end in mind and work the processes backwards, you can actually build something ideally in an outsourcing type model. It won't be your all cure-all solution, but I will say that if you're going to do it and do it well, make sure you have an internal team that can manage that source really, really well from a data perspective to a output KPI perspective, and then a cultural perspective that it's working within your own team. Because we've even internally built a call team there are people from our own team that moved up, and they're blaming the call team for scheduling ill. And I'm thinking, they filled your schedule, right? And so there's that perfect balance that you're going to have to find when you guys get into outsourcing, and it can happen.
Okay, this is amazing advice, and this is incredible. Everyone will be around and kind of available to chat to if anyone needs any more questions. So we appreciate all of you panelists for joining us today.
Thank you.